wonderful tribute. Everything this morning has been. My name is Bill Gramer, and I thank you, Michelle, for asking me to share. Thank you, Wayne, for those stories from Mike's early years. Michelle asked me to speak because I knew Mike in a particular way these last 10 years. I knew Mike through our home group fellowship, Bible study, through church. And I want to share some things that Mike, from that time, that Mike shared with me, that all of us can benefit from. I will, forever. And he wanted this shared. And so, thank you, Steve and Karen and Mary, for letting me share today. Thank you, Ed and Don and Sue, Mike's brothers and sisters. Marge couldn't be here. But thank you, those of you who may be here that he worked with. I'm going to mention you, and friends and family. I got to know Mike because Michelle reached out to us about 10 years ago at his first occurrence of cancer and needed a place for Anna and Ethan to stay while she was tending to Mike. And my first memory, I don't know how this came to be, but then he had some kind of relapse and needed to go back in for a second surgery for something. And it was unknown what was going on, and I don't know even why I was there, but I was at the hospital all alone with Mike, and he was going to go in for surgery. And I'm sure people were coming later. It was just me that was there with him. And so we spoke, and he talked, and I could tell it was not certain what was going to happen. And I could tell he didn't know me well. He was speaking probably sensitive to me, that he didn't want to lay a big burden on me. But I could tell it wasn't clear. He didn't know why this had to happen. The doctors weren't quite sure. He wasn't sure what the outcome was going to be. And so he says, at one point, I suppose it's all going to be okay. At that moment, my passion, my personality, my calling as a friend and as a brother in Christ kicked in, and I shared with him something that not everybody responds like Mike did. But I thought, I don't know if it's going to be okay. I know Mike a little, but I don't know everything about him. And I wanted to share what I knew would be okay. And so I said, Mike, this may not turn out okay. This may go badly. I don't know. But I want to share with you something that will turn out okay no matter what. And I shared with him the power of Jesus Christ, and that we can trust anything we go through to him, irrespective of the outcome. The certainty that Jesus Christ can take a circumstance and make it good is something that is certain. And, I said it about like that. And Mike said, wow, well, I suppose that's a different way to look at it. Well, he came out of the surgery, and something that happened was that moment endeared him to me and me to him. He responded in a way like, Bill, you really shoot straight. You didn't mess around. You didn't just try to make me feel good. And because of his heritage, I can tell he appreciated, I didn't know that at the time, but he appreciated my words as something that he knew was of value to him. And so I can say not all of the people I've been direct with have responded that way. I'm grateful that Mike did, because I'm happy you guys stayed in our lives. So we invited Michelle and Mike and their family to our home-based Bible study, a small group that met in our home out from this church, New Life. We have many of them, and we had several couples that we began to study the Bible with, and I got to know Mike through that very closely. Many of you who are here today are in that. Something that Mike shared that came out of that time we had as a home group family and as men was Michael Ross and I visited Mike maybe 3 weeks ago, and he was in the hospital before he went out for the rehab for a while. Anyway, when I first walked in, we talked, and he shared with me a memory, a detail which astonished me because I couldn't remember the level of detail he did. He said, "Bill, do you remember as a men's group from New Life Church, we took our sons, we were going up to your cabin, and we were all driving in your big 15-passenger van. We have a 15-passenger van because we have a big family, something that we also shared with Volgrens as we homeschool, and so we got to know them. That van's come in handy a lot. And we took all these men and sons up to the cabin, and we were driving up toward Hayward, Winter, Wisconsin area. I don't remember where we were, but at some point, Mike shared with me his father was in a nursing home or some rehabilitation home. And Steve, you were there. Was that in Amory? I don't remember where we were, but as he shared that, I thought to myself, well, we need to visit him. And I turned the van around and went, and we spent time with Steve. We took a big picture, and I got to find it. I wish I could have gotten that to you. With all the guys and Steve and your father there. He said, "Bill, you turned around for me." I said, "Of course, Mike." I was thinking to myself, I had to. I remember my parents were ill and were passing at that time, and I knew the time with parents was precious. We studied it in our home group, and it was just made sense to me. He goes, "You know, Bill, not many people will turn around for you." I share that because I'm going to come back to it. It's something we can all do with friends in our lives. And I couldn't remember the detail that Mike did, but he remembered that. And it astonished me, and I thought there's a life lesson. I don't want to forget that because I want to continually do that for people in my life. He was a simple guy in speech, but I say that cautiously because he's complex, like all of us are. But he spoke very simply and directly and plainly. And Matt summed it up for me last night really well when he shared. Mike, everywhere Mike went, he had duct tape and a Bible. And he said to me once, "Matt, you can fix a lot of things with duct tape." And Matt was saying how he sees so many things around the house with duct tape. Okay, now this is a really deep insight because it shows something that Mike knew intrinsically, and he valued, and it's something it's universally true. There are things you can fix with duct tape. And there are things that can't be touched that way, but that can be with the truth and the principles of the Bible. And between those two things, you got pretty much everything covered. You know, and that was Mike. That was the way he was. He also carried a Constitution around with him, I guess. And he and I shared and would speak about those things. And when we talked about that. We talked about the foundations of our country, the Constitution. I taught with the older kids in our co-op, a homeschool co-op. We went through the Constitution. I read it for the first time as an adult, and it was astonishing to me, the preamble, how powerful it was. And I talked to Mike about that. And yet he had, like me, a renaissance of an appreciation for the power of it. Well, where I'm going is, it revealed something about Mike's appreciation for things that had value. He was fascinated that I collected coins, and I had not really numismatic, I guess, if you're really serious. They're just plain bullion. But one of the things he was amazed at is I have a $50 gold piece here. And I would talk with Mike about intrinsic value. And he would look at that and he said, "Bill, look at that. The very bottom of it, it says $50. But how much is that thing worth?" Well, if we took it out and sold it through a broker, it would you get about $1,200, this 1 ounce piece. The principle of that to Mike was, that has intrinsic value. Not a piece of paper with a $50 printed on it that means $50 then, $50 now, that's all it's worth. This has value that appreciates, that can't be touched. Now that was something that he shared because he saw the Bible has that kind of value. It has value that can't be touched and moved, and it increases in value over time. We had that kind of connection, and we shared, he shared with me his insights, and I gained so much from that. Part of the things that we learned in home group is the value of family, and even after 30 years, many of us were still learning. And he said something to Mike and I when we visited that reminded me of 5 years ago when he had a relapse, or was it only 3 years ago? Boy, it seems like a long time. It was only 3 years ago we'd come over and pray. So we had that relapse, and a lot of the guys from the home groups would go over to your home to pray with you. And I'd see some of you there that way. Well, I remember one night we asked, what can we do, Mike? Well, there was things that we could do, like take food or cut the yard, or do things for them that they might not be able to do for themselves. But they're pretty self-sufficient, so there wasn't a lot of that. He said, just keep being, and then he's talking to a bunch of men who are praying there. Keep being examples around my children. Keep being there for my wife. Let them see you the way I do. And you know, we all need that. We need people in our lives. And Mike shared that was a way we could minister to them. Well, that was 3 years ago. Boy, it seemed like 5. But when Mike Ross and I walked in the hospital, that was one of the things he said. This time I can tell I had a greater sense of certainty. Stay around my family. He had a sense of security in Lyra and Aaron's position in life, and you're being old and established, older and established. But he thought of his younger children, Ethan and Anna. And he said, I want all of them to know this, but he's particularly, because you're younger, you know, he valued them all. He wanted you to know Jesus is the foundation. And he would say that over and over. You know, you don't know how much this morphine and drugs he was on, but I knew he meant it, but he just would keep repeating it more than you would. Jesus is the foundation. I don't want them to forget that. Friends, we don't want to forget that. I want them to know, if you know the story of Moses and Pharaoh, if you're like me, I watched the Charlton Heston version this last Easter of the 10 Commandments. They play it because it's a Passover movie. That story had meaning to Mike, and he shared it with us 3 weeks ago. I want my children to know, you got to know this to understand what he's going to say here. Pharaoh will be Pharaoh. And Pharaoh can harden his heart and stop you and block you in your life. Pharaoh will be Pharaoh. But God will be God. And he can lift up a Moses and get you through whatever Pharaoh blocks. I mean, he said it that way, didn't he? And it's like, wow. I want my children to know this, that no matter what they're facing, God can have patience, that God will overcome that. The same way that story had with Moses overcoming Pharaoh and releasing people from bondage. And then he said, again, Jesus is the foundation. I'm just so touched with that, because, and connected to the whole being in one another's lives. He had a value for the local church family, because he knew the power of your physical family and the connections he had. The local church family can be that same way through the power of Jesus Christ. And that we can minister to one another that way.